Welcome, everybody. Come on, sit down. Thank you. Well, if you're here today, your data is probably not perfectly organized for the age of AI. And you know what? It's nothing to be embarrassed about. Perfectly natural when you're dealing with content life cycles and collaboration for things to get a little lost, things need more organization. In this session, we're going to be talking about how to prepare your data for Microsoft 365 Copilot, or, as we frequently talk about, address the concern about oversharing. So if that's the topic you're interested in, you've come to the right place. And we have a number of people here who can help you with this. My name's Alex Posen. I lead security and trust product marketing for M365 Copilot. Over here, we have Dave Minassian. Dave, do you want to wave your hand? Dave leads product management for SharePoint Advanced Management. We sometimes call him Sam because he spends so much time working on SAM. Dave spends a lot of time with our customers, helping them solve significant challenges. One of my favorite examples is a customer he was working with, and that customer spent 2.5 years doing an audit and remediation of certain oversharing issues. Dave was able to help them address this in about 24 hours to get the problem started, identify all of the overshared sites. So one of the lessons here is if you're getting stuck, don't spend 2.5 years. Come talk to us. Next to Dave, we have Erica. Thanks, Erica. So Erica leads Purview product marketing, and she's actually written a book on Purview. She's also works with a number of our customers, helped them solve a number of significant challenges related to governance and oversharing. Now, let me walk you through the agenda for today. This session is going to start off a little slower and lighter. I'm going to go through some very basic concepts that are foundational to understanding the things that are going to come next. So if you know these things, pat yourself on the back. You're in a good place. If not, it'll be a good introduction. We'll define what oversharing is. We'll talk about the common types of and causes of oversharing. And then we'll jump into solutions. First, how do we address oversharing at the site level? Next, how do we do that at the file level? Then we'll close with some resources that we've been cooking up over the last few months. Before we do that, though, I'd like to start off with an example of what oversharing looks like. So let's imagine for a second that it's not snow flurries outside, but it's August. It's a beautiful sunny day, and you're curious, hey, are there any reorganizations or organizational changes coming up in my organization? Maybe a question you'd ask if you're enjoying the day. So you type this into Copilot. Copilot will come back with some responses. If you look at them, the first two, not a problem. But this third one is confidential. It's a confidential reorg happening next month. And now we have a problem, because this was not intended to be accessible to the user. If any of you have dealt with internal data oversharing or leak issues, this kind of ruins your day, right? This is not the kind of thing you want to see. The question is, why did this happen? Because Copilot actually did what it was intended to do in this case, but we still have this problem. What happens is that Copilot will only retrieve information that the user has access to. But that's the big question. What do they have access to? Let me walk you through a process at a high level so you can understand how Copilot uses information. So first thing that happens, you're going to submit a prompt, just like we asked the question. Orchestrator, which is a part of Copilot, will determine what does it need in order to answer that prompt. And then it will look at Microsoft Graph, and it'll identify information that is relevant, and you also have access to it. And it will append that information to the prompt, and then the LLM uses that additional information to generate a response and bring that back to you. Now, what happened in that situation is an example of internal oversharing. That boils down to just two things: too much access and too few controls. When we talk about too much access, that's often a bias towards overly broad permissions. So links or permissions are set far too broadly. And too few controls is when you're not applying the controls already available to better protect the data. So as an example, sensitivity labels, which can help you distinguish different types of content and have policies follow that content as it's used, they're not present here. The implications are significant. One is what we just saw, which is the risk of overexposure of information in Copilot, but also in search. And what becomes more challenging is that AI is really good at discovering additional information that we previously didn't discover ourselves and bringing it to us. So that's one of the things we want to be able to address. But it gets hard to address that without the right set of tools. Generally, where you see this challenge most frequently is around OneDrive and SharePoint sites. And what we'll do today is we'll discuss 5 common reasons why this happens in SharePoint. So let me walk you through these one by one. First one is site privacy set to public. That means that anyone in your organization is able to access that content. If you flip that to private, it's only the site members. But a lot of sites are set to public. Second one is default sharing link option is set to everyone. The default is the path of least resistance, and a lot of users will use that. But that means that anyone, again, in your organization will be able to potentially see that content in response from Copilot or be eligible for it. The next one, broken permission inheritance, that's a pretty interesting one. So what that means is, say you have a site, you have a set of permissions on the site. Somebody went in and they decoupled or broke the inheritance of those permissions for a folder or a document library. That can create some unexpected effects because the site owner doesn't know that this happened. And if you go and try to remediate later, you may not be aware that you're dealing with a broken inheritance issue. These things will start to interact with, you'll see in a second. The next one is use of everyone external users. Again, that will make content available to everybody. So if you were to set a site to private, then you can't use that group. But if somebody were to go in and break the permissions, that previous issue, on the folder or library, then they could use that everyone except external users group. So now you start to see the interaction effects between these. This can get a little bit complex. The last example is around sensitivity labels. And I've already talked about how they provide a number of policies that allow you to protect content. But if they're not used, those policies cannot follow the content. So we have a couple of tools that allow us to address these oversharing issues. And you've probably heard this week a number of news around innovation and new capabilities around these tools. I'll talk about one update, and then Dave and Erica will cover some of the other ones. But the list is extensive. I have a blog post on Microsoft Tech Community that covers many of the announcements in here, but we won't be able to cover all of them here today. So the first one is actually Microsoft 365 Copilot itself, because what we announced earlier this week is that SharePoint Advanced Management will be included with M365 Copilot. And that will start rolling out in late January. So you're going to get the content governance, site management capabilities of SAM if you're a Microsoft 365 customer. If you need, thank you. Appreciate that. If you're looking for those capabilities sooner, we do have a trial as well, if you can't wait till January. Now, Purview offers a number of security, governance, compliance capabilities that allow you to manage and secure and govern your data across M365. I am going to spend just a couple minutes giving you a high-level overview of these products so you understand the baseline, and then Dave and Erica will go into more detail. So first was SAM. SAM is really designed around a few things: addressing content sprawl. A lot of sites, a lot of content, that can be a challenge. Second was what we're talking about today, which is oversharing. How do you address that? Lastly, is site lifecycle management. The way SAM accomplishes all of that is through a collection of reports and controls. And there's a pretty rich set of both to allow you to do these things. And you will get some examples from Dave in a second. On the Purview side, what we're talking about is 3 things essentially. First is the ability to discover AI risks. For example, do my prompts contain sensitive information types? Protecting data, such as DLP policies, or governing usage. So that's the ability to set retention policies on your prompts, or detect non-compliant usage. Before I hand over, I'm going to give you a quick roadmap of what you're about to see, because what Dave and Erica will do is they'll show you a number of features and screenshots and demos, but let me lay out the roadmap of what you're about to see. First, how do we address oversharing at the site level? At a high level, there are 4 steps. First, we're going to run a report and identify overshared sites, and you'll see in a second what that means. Permission state report will help us accomplish that. The next thing we want to do is, as an admin, you can't solve all of this by yourself, is we want to enlist site owners to start addressing oversharing and permissions in those sites. And SAM will allow you to do that at scale. The next thing you want to do is identify sites with overshared issues and start locking them down temporarily. Temporary lockdown is accomplished with restricted access control. That means that during that time, those sites will not be accessible to anyone except the specified group that is there to clean up the site. The last step is, well, we've got some sites that are so sensitive, we do not want their data to appear in Copilot. OK, you can restrict that with restricted content discovery. That's a roadmap for addressing at the site level. Now, let me give you the roadmap, high level, with what Erica will show you at the file level. First, we want to identify overshared files. The way you can do that is with new oversharing assessments in Data Security Posture Management for AI. This was announced this week. There's a lot of power in there. You'll see this in a few minutes. And then the second thing you want to do is, OK, let's talk about this at the file level. We want some files to be kept out of Copilot responses. We don't want them to be processed and summarized. You can do that with sensitivity labels using data loss prevention in M365 Copilot. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Dave, who's going to walk you through addressing oversharing at the site level.
All right.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, folks. I'm Dave. Thanks, Alex, for the really nice introduction there. So I'll talk to you about the SharePoint Advanced Management. So let me actually go to the next screen here. So SharePoint Advanced Management, first of all, I do want to kind of premise this whole part of the conversation and really quickly mention why are all these controls in SharePoint? Because this is a question I get all the time, right? The reason for this is because SharePoint actually backs a lot of the collaboration within Microsoft 365. So as a result, a lot of the controls that you have, admin controls to manage oversharing and manage permissions, are within SharePoint and OneDrive Admin Center. So that's a really important thing to note. Now, we have several different areas, like Alex mentioned, that are covered as part of SharePoint Advanced Management. The particular area that we're going to concentrate on today is the oversharing, and specifically the new reporting that is coming out with a bunch of actions that you can use to identify, isolate, and also deal or remediate any oversharing issues. So permission state report, or the oversharing report, baseline report, is essentially it's part of the data access governance. It's an area within SharePoint Advanced Management. We have a lot of different reports that are there today, and there are going to be more coming in the near future. The one that we're specifically going to be talking about is the permissioned users report. So this report is very simple to set up, just like any other data access governance report. Just create the report. There are a bunch of configurations that are available to you. So as you notice at the top there for scope, you have SharePoint or OneDrive for Business. So as of today, this is all available in PowerShell. All the UX is coming very, very shortly. It is available for, the reporting and capabilities that we're going to talk about today are available for SharePoint. The OneDrive is coming in very, very shortly as well. And I'm talking about in the next couple of weeks or so. The next thing you want to do is template. So the template has, so as I mentioned earlier, SharePoint backs a lot of different collaboration, lots of different apps. So each different app and different collaboration sources, they use different templates. So you can actually target this report for specific templates, creation source, et cetera. And as you notice, there are a couple of other attributes, privacy and sensitivity. So privacy, private or public, and then sensitivity labels are also a very important part of kind of being able to target the policies and the different capabilities we're going to talk about. And this also kind of leads into what Erica is going to talk about around how do you make sure that you have all your content labeled properly and at scale later on. Now, the other really important point I do want to call out there is sensitivity info type. And we'll see this in the report. So this is also actually part of the file explorer within Purview that you can set up. And if you're using that, all those data points will actually get reflected within here. And all these things are basically there to help you target the data, because you can have a lot of different data points, lots of different sites, files, et cetera. This helps you kind of isolate and target. The last part is a snapshot report. So one thing that we got from customers quite a bit, or feedback that we got from customers, was that a lot of our DAG reporting or data access governance reporting was activity-based, so it was set for 28 days. I'm very, very happy to announce that this report is a snapshot report, which will cover your entire tenant, regardless of activity. So that's an important thing to note. And of course, you can run it at, for the last 28 days as well. But that's a huge kind of important part that I wanted to announce. Once the report is initiated, it's a fairly quick thing. It could take anywhere from 24 hours to 72 hours, depending on the size of your tenant. We've seen tenants with a couple of million sites that took even a little bit longer than 72 hours, but it's relatively very quick. It's much, much faster than what's available today. Once you run the report, this is the output of the report. So there are several key things to call out here. Okay, the first part is total permissioned users. So this is a really, really big part and a huge ask that we've been getting from customers. So what that does is essentially it shows you the unique number of users that have access to the site. Okay, so as you know, sites can have individual users, they can have groups, security groups, all sorts of different things, and people can be in multiple groups, right? Individually added to the site, etc. So what we're doing there is we're actually breaking up the groups, looking at all the people in the group, and then deduping them, and showing you the actual real number of users that have access to the site. The next one over, the next column there is files. So that will show you total how many files there are in the site. And then the sensitivity files is, again, if you're using the File Explorer in Purview, that data will flow into this report, and it will show you, it will help you kind of identify, how many of the files that are in the site are actually sensitive files. So this is really important because that, again, helps you target the potential overshared content. So moving forward, so items with unique permissions. So Alex earlier mentioned that one of the big things that happened is broken inheritance, where a file is added to the site, and then the user actually goes in to the file itself and removes people from the file, and that breaks the inheritance of the file, which means you can't really control the access to that file from the site level. So this column, the items with unique permissions, will essentially show you how many files are in that state. Okay? EU permissions, it's basically everyone except external users. That will show you how many files are enabled with EU permissions. And then the rest are pretty self-explanatory, different sharing links that are part of the site, and then whether the site is private or public, etc. So with that, so just the same report with the 5 issues or types of oversharing that Alex identified earlier. This is kind of where all that fits in within this report. All right, now the next question we get is, okay, so I have the report, what do I do with it, right? How do I actually fix all these things, right? One thing that we're also announcing here is that this report will have a site access review, which is an actual action that you can take at scale on all the sites that you identified or that you deem to be potentially overshared. And what that does is essentially we are automatically behind the scenes, once it's initiated, behind the scenes we go identify the site owners of the content, and then they get an email saying, hey, your admin is asking you to please go and review your content and access. The site owner clicks on the button, and they will come to this new dashboard that will essentially show them all the files that have problems. So that could be broken inheritance, that could be EU, all sorts of different oversharing issues. And this is important because sites sometimes can have thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of files. So not all those need to be present here. We're just specifically targeting and isolating the files that are important to manage for specifically, kind of reducing the oversharing. All right, and again, as earlier mentioned, all the different, like the 5 types of oversharing are actually also show up here. So as long as the site owner actually goes through and cleans these things up, we will automatically start handling a lot of the oversharing issues that come if they're not cleaned. Now, another question I get quite often. Okay, so I ran the permission state report, I initiated the site access review, but what if my site owners take a really long time to respond or go and clean up their data? So restricted access control, there are lots of different use cases for restricted access control, but in this case, this could be a really good enforcement functionality, right? So what this does is essentially it locks down the sites regardless of how many people the site was shared with, right? Or how many people have access to it. You can lock it down to specifically site owners, or you can determine whoever you want to give access to do the edit. And once the audit is done, you can actually remove the restricted access control and everything just goes back to normal. Now, we do have script that actually we put together and that will be published, and also step-by-step instructions on how to kind of enable all this stuff that is going to be available in LearnDocs after Ignite. But you can essentially automate a lot of these things. So you can, the automation will work permission state report, run access review, initiate RAC, and once the access review is done, come back and remove RAC. So you don't have to do this manually one by one. And eventually we'll have policies that will go do that on your behalf. So it's fairly straightforward to initiate RAC. You just select the sites and then run RAC. One thing I do want to call out that I forgot to mention is that you can actually download the report, and the downloaded report will have even more content. So you will have a lot more columns and a lot richer content. It's just in the UX, we're showing the really primary basic things that we think that you should be looking at. All right, now restricted content discovery is another part of all the restricted controls that we have as part of SAM. So what this does is essentially it restricts and hides content from Copilot and Tenant Search in a surgical way, right? So you can actually, as part of your audit, you can, we see a lot of customers identify sites that are, top secret sites or secret sauce sites, and they don't ever want Copilot or anyone looking at those besides very, very few people. You can either do the site access or the RAC, which is the site access control, or you can restrict content discovery, which means everyone that has access to the site will continue to have access to the site, but the Copilot will not be able to reason over the content. Okay, and this is a pretty easy thing to kind of implement. It's just currently it's in PowerShell. However, it is coming also to UX. All this is all the documentation, everything that I've mentioned is already available. Some of the automations kind of scripts are coming, and also step-by-step instructions are coming as well to you. So the goal of all this is essentially going from this screen that Alex mentioned to this screen. And this is kind of what our goal is to proactively go and identify potentially overshared content and proactively work with the site owners in a scalable way to deal with this content and clean it up on a continual basis. All right, so with that, I'm going to pass the mic to our Erica here, and she can cover the rest of the goodness in Purview.
Perfect.
Erica.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
So in addition to all the excellent options that Dave just showed you, I want to go over some additional options that we might be able to use in Purview to look at protecting files across sites instead of mitigating site by site. So just as a reminder from the beginning, we discover, protect, and govern files and data in Microsoft 365 and beyond with Microsoft Purview. And then our two announcements that I'm going to demo for you in just a moment are our new data security posture management for AI assessment, including our oversharing assessment, and our data loss prevention for Microsoft 365 Copilot feature, which blocks Copilot from processing files that have a specific sensitivity label. So first, let's look at the oversharing assessment and data security posture management for AI. We want to know where our biggest risks are and be able to mitigate them with a couple clicks, right? So we typically, indicator of risk, as Dave mentioned, is the presence of sensitive content in files. So we can scan your environment and see how many files may contain sensitive data, and also look at if they're labeled or not. Then we can protect the content that you would like that's maybe unlabeled or otherwise sensitive with a few different options that we'll go through in the demo. And then lastly, you want to know what's going on with people using Copilot in your organization and monitor for non-compliant usage or other risky behavior. And we're able to also do that with data security posture management. Next is data loss prevention for Microsoft 365 Copilot. So this one was a huge customer request, and I know it's one you've been waiting for a while. Sometimes you just don't want Copilot to process certain files. It could be because it contains something really sensitive, like merger and acquisition data. Could be you're waiting for, if you're in the EU, the Workers' Council to approve the use, and so you need to temporarily disable it. So if the file has a sensitivity label that you specify, you can prevent it from using it in grounding, and then also using the contents of the document in responses. So for example, summarizing the file or answering a question about that contents. So with that, let's see this in action. There we go. So here I am in Microsoft Purview portal. This is an admin portal similar to the SharePoint portal or the Exchange Admin Center, where you go to configure security and compliance controls in Microsoft Purview. And then within that, I have the data security posture management for AI solution. So you can see we provide some reports about what's going on in your environment in regard to AI. For example, if somebody is sharing sensitive information in chats, what type of sensitive information is being shared. And we can even look across multiple environments like ChatGPT. If you want to look into more details, you can click View Details and actually look at what files are being shared, as well as how they're being accessed exactly. And this is just a version of the audit log that's easier to see and navigate. So next, let's look at some of the other reports available. So first, maybe we should cover what sensitivity labels are and how they might help you. Sensitivity labels are a way to apply protections at the file level. This could be done through encryption, where you want specific groups or users to only have access to that file based on the sensitivity label. It also follows the file wherever it goes. So if somebody downloads the file, tries to put it on a flash drive, and you don't have DLP blocking those actions, it still will require them to be logged into their account that has permission to open the file, or it won't open for them. So it's a way that we can quickly mitigate these potential risks at scale without having to go site by site. Now let's look at the new data assessment for oversharing concerns. So here, you can see that I've run an oversharing assessment a couple times. It will capture a point in time for that week, so that's why you can see I've been running it every week. And then you could also, of course, run it for just specific sites or users or situations. Let's go ahead and look at this assessment that we just ran last week. So a couple of things. You'll see sensitivity labels on data, and it correlates between if it detects sensitive information in files in the site and whether or not they're protected. So for example, if they're not labeled and it detects sensitive information, that would probably concern me and be something I'd want to take a look at. It also provides the overview of what types of sharing links are used. So maybe you don't want external users to access the site because of the sensitivity. You can see that here. And then, of course, you can see specific information about one site. So actually, the first thing I did was I am mostly concerned about the most accessed files that contain sensitive data, and I want to make sure that they're appropriately protected. So I sorted the list by the times that a user accessed the sensitive content, and I can see that my top site is this Obsidian merger site. And I know mergers and acquisitions is a very sensitive type of data. So it shows the similar information about labeled and unlabeled and sensitive versus not for this one site. But then if I click on this Protect tab, we start to get the options that we have for actually mitigating these issues. So first are site-level protections, where you can restrict all items using the SharePoint restricted content discovery that Dave just went over. You could also use the new DLP for M365 Copilot to restrict access to by the label. Then we get into more file-based controls. So we could set a sensitivity label on a document library and label everything in that library as it's created and edited. Or we could create a policy to auto-apply sensitivity labels to everything in that site. Additionally, we can also set a sensitivity level on the container and the site itself. So for example, if we label it confidential, then it must be set to private and not public, like Dave mentioned. You can't have external users, and the site's not discoverable by your average employee. And then lastly, sometimes the best way to protect data is to not have it at all. So if you would like to look at how maybe there's old files on the site that you could delete, you could create a retention policy to lessen your attack surface. Lastly, we have some options to more monitor ongoing this site's activity. So another thing that SharePoint Advanced Management provides is a site access review, as Dave showed. So you could kick that off right here, or also manage that through Intra if you have well-managed groups there and are following the identity governance best practices. So this is our first version of the oversharing report, and we did focus first on labeled, unlabeled, sensitive or not. And I would love to hear afterward or at our booth, like what other questions do you want to answer about your data to identify what's highest risk to you, so we can add it into our next version. So next, let's look at DLP for Copilot. So I'm actually going to start with an example. So remember that sensitive site, Obsidian merger? Well, you can see I have proper sensitivity labels on some of these documents, and I should have access to the site, and I do. So I see the files, and it's fine. This marketing strategy file is really long. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the link. So first thing, even though it says people in your organization with the link can edit, because it has a sensitivity label that restricts the access, that is always going to win over a sharing link. So you can see how the labels could help mitigate any existing sharing links as well. And then I'm going to go over into Copilot, and I'm going to ask to summarize the file. It's going to take a second and think about it. And you can see that it knows I have access, so it's acknowledged that the file exists, but it has declined to summarize it because I have used DLP to block that label here, the Obsidian merger label, from being processed by Copilot. The reason that you can see the title of the document and the link and potentially some metadata is because that is in the search index. And this option doesn't block the search index or block the file from appearing in search, unless, of course, you don't have access to the file. This is simply restricting Copilot from using the contents of the file for grounding or for summaries. So how do we set this up? So we're going to go back to Microsoft Purview and then our data loss prevention policies. Here's a couple of policies that I have set up, some ones that we recommend when you're working with AI. But I'm interested mostly in this Obsidian merger policy, because that's what you just saw how it happened. So I'm going to skip some of the boring steps and go right to the new feature, which is now when you choose where to apply a DLP policy, you have a new option to apply it to Microsoft 365 Copilot. So if you'd like to set this up, you would select that location, and then praying this loads, hey. Then when I go to set the rules, which is essentially our if-then logic, we can see that if the content contains a sensitivity label, Obsidian merger, and you can specify what label you'd like, then the action that we want to take is to prevent Copilot from processing that content. So I simply check the box and save the step. And then, of course, you could start out in, well, actually, no, you can't simulation. There's no simulation mode for this type of policy, so you turn it on immediately and have it start working. So those are our two new biggest features for Purview. Of course, there's a lot more that couldn't be covered in this session. So definitely check out some of the other sessions and our blog. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alex.
Wasn't that great? A lot of new tools and capabilities to help you address oversharing. But we're not done. There's more. One of the most common questions we get at the booths here and talking to customers is, hey, I want to do Microsoft Copilot. OK, but how do I get my data ready? Yes, we have new tools, we have new features, but how do I actually do this? So what we did is we brought together a group of experts across SharePoint, Purview, Copilot, and we said, hey, how can we make it easier for our customers to solve this problem quickly? And we built this blueprint. We call it the Oversharing Blueprint. I'll give you the link where you can get it. This is a high-level view. There are multiple layers of depth to it. What this is it's organized in 3 phases. First phase is optional, which is a pilot. You use a pilot when you really want to figure out, hey, does this work for me? How do I do it quickly on content that is in sites that are safe, and I don't have a lot of time to go and play around and adjust content in other sites. That's your pilot. You can skip that and go straight to deployment. Deployment takes about 2 to 4 weeks. Depends on the size and complexity, so this is an average. Your mileage may vary. But deployment is really a place where you go and deploy it at scale for employees in your company. And as part of that deployment, you will improve your security and governance posture. You will be managing site privacy better, and you will be able to use Copilot across the organization. But you're not done at deploy. As you saw over this week, we're building new capabilities. Copilot is going to be touching more surfaces. In addition to that, there's always an opportunity to get better and to improve the way you manage. So you'll be using reporting, additional controls, automatic labels to run a better operation over time. And that's an ongoing phase. Let me dive a little deeper. So these 2 slides summarize the 2 paths you can take with this blueprint. The first one is the foundational path. The second one is the optimized path, and that uses some of the more advanced capabilities in E5. At this URL, you find all the details. We also have additional resources that help you understand how do I turn on these features, and then what's the impact on Copilot. A lot of work went into this. We are excited to share this with you, and we are looking for feedback. We intend to continue improving this based on that feedback to make it easier and easier for you to address oversharing. And then I'll just close with one last thing. So a lot of sessions at Ignite this year about security, about M365 Copilot. I would like to call out one of them, which is titled Follow the Prompt. Erica was speaking on this stage about this topic earlier today. Ben, sitting in the second row right there too, was one of the speakers. And why this session is important is because it takes the entire life cycle of a prompt, and it helps you understand what happens to a prompt from creation all the way to the end. All the controls that are being touched by it, and how you can better manage and govern your data in relation to Copilot. So if you're looking to learn, and it looks like you are since you are here, this provides a lot of foundational knowledge on which you can build and get better. With that, I want to thank Dave and Eric. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We look forward to hearing about your success with addressing oversharing and managing M365 Copilot. Thank you so much.